Welcome back to Grow Bible Study for Couples. If you're just joining us and you haven't yet watched session 1, please do so now so you know what the study's about and who it's for. Now, hopefully last week you had some good discussion with your partner and grew in a deeper understanding of your identity in Christ, out of which flows that unconditional love called agape. The foundation for this study, as you recall, is Matthew 22, verses 37 to 40, which say, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments." This session, we're going to zero in on verse 39 when Jesus says, "Love your neighbor." Now, it may sound like a stretch to you that I'm telling you your neighbor is your partner, but in fact, the Greek word for this, plesion, means any person other than ourselves, or in the case of a couple, it's always the other. But what of your neighbor or other? How do you extend agape love toward your partner? Did you know that all 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, contain a witness account of this exchange between Jesus and the Pharisees? Now, witness accounts are a funny thing. A number of years ago, someone close to me got involved in an abusive situation, and the police were called in. When I spoke to the officer afterward, I was surprised to learn that he considered both accounts true, even though some of the details were different. When I asked him about this, he said, yes, both accounts can be different, depending on your perspective at the time. So in Matthew, when Jesus says, "Love God, love others," the Pharisees have nothing more to say. But in Luke 10:29, they push the envelope a little further by saying, "And who is my neighbor?" To this, Jesus responded by telling the parable of the Good Samaritan. Now, if you think you and your partner can get tense at times, you have got to hear the backstory between the Jews and the Samaritans. About 1,000 years before Jesus walked the earth, Israel went to war with itself and split into 2 kingdoms, the north and the south. The southern kingdom, which contains Jerusalem, continued to follow Jewish traditions. The northern kingdom was captured not soon after the split, and over time they began to intermarry and follow the pagan traditions of their captors. The Samaritans considered the Jews a bunch of elite snobs, and the Jews considered the Samaritans morally and spiritually inferior. On your worst day, at your worst with each other, you could not begin to tap the surface of this 1,000-year-old feud simmering between these 2 people groups. So you can imagine the shock of his Jewish audience when Jesus told the story of a Jewish traveler who was mugged and beaten and left on the side of the road, of how his fellow Jews, seeing him broken and bleeding, crossed the street to avoid him rather than help, of how a Samaritan man came along and not only tended to his injuries on the spot, but took him to a local inn for additional care and paid for that care, leaving him without any word of thanks or acknowledgement from the injured man. Then Jesus said to his audience, "Which of these people showed him compassion?" The Pharisees had no choice but to respond with, "The one who had mercy on him." And Jesus said, "That is what you are to do. Go and do likewise." We are to go and do likewise. So how do we extend mercy to our partner? The Oxford Dictionary defines mercy as showing compassion or forgiveness toward one whom we have the power to punish or harm. And in romantic relationships, we have that power to punish or harm. And if we believe that our partner has broken a trust or hurt us in some way, either intentionally or unintentionally, we wield that power. This is our human nature. We get mean and we get justified in our moral superiority. We try to convince our partner that our way of thinking is the right way of thinking. But with agape love, we're kind, regardless of whether we believe he or she deserves it. How do we do this? Ephesians 4:15 tells us to speak the truth in love without anger or accusation. Our goal is to help our partner grow, not to defend ourselves or be superior in the relationship. In last week's homework, You took time to discuss your perceived flaws with your partner and confess any selfish behavior you had toward him or her. This made you vulnerable with one another. It gave you the power to be either merciful or mean. When we extend agape love toward our partner and we show that kindness and compassion, we are acting just as God does with us when we mess up. I'd like to introduce you now to Alex and Shanoa. Very shortly after they started seeing each other, they discovered Shanoa was pregnant and decided to make a go of it by living together. Here's a bit of their story.
Well, it being such a new relationship, I was very scared in the beginning. I didn't know what to expect. But as we grew and we started working as a team, it made a lot of things easier, and I'm not scared anymore. I'm very confident in our choices.
One time when I was pregnant, I wanted Alex to come spend more time with me, and so I lied and told him I had an ultrasound appointment so that he would come over. Then I said it was canceled, so he was already there, so he had to spend time with me.
Knowing Shanoa was with the baby all day, having a difficult time, tired, after work I would go to the gym instead of relieving her from the baby.
I don't like to do the dishes. It's something I've always hated as a child, and I'll avoid it whenever possible. But I do know that Alex likes to come home. He can't do anything until the kitchen is clean. So sometimes on my lunch break I'll come home and I'll do the dishes so that when he comes home he has a clean kitchen to come home to.
As our daughter grew older, I had a better understanding of being a parent and being a partner. So now I know when I come home and Shanoa's had a tough day, I like to relieve her. I would take the baby, just for example, I would give her a bath, I would cook dinner, put her to sleep while Shanoa would rest.
Well, I've definitely learned that my way isn't always the right way. And that comes from, like, growing up, I had rules to follow, and then coming into a place where Alex maybe wasn't used to the same amount of rules, that there was definitely a lot of compromise that needed to be, on both sides, I would say, to get us to a place where we're both happy with the standards in the household.
As you can tell from their story, exercising agape love in a relationship isn't always easy. Sometimes they succeeded in this, and sometimes they didn't. The truth is, your partner may not recognize when you're extending kindness toward him or her. And if they don't recognize it, and you're hoping that they do, it can plant a seed of bitterness and unforgiveness. Imagine if, when that Samaritan man left the inn, he thought, that injured Jew never even thanked me. And then, a month later, he circles back around to the inn and he asks the innkeeper, "Did that injured Jew ever say anything to you or leave a message for me?" And the innkeeper says, "No, he got better and he just left." Now the Samaritan thinks, what a waste of time that was, no gratitude whatsoever. And suddenly, this beautiful act of kindness is overshadowed by his unforgiveness. If you are extending kindness toward your partner when you don't believe they deserve it, and you're asking for gratitude in return, you are not acting in selfless agape love. This kind of love takes time to develop. So I ask you, are you in it for the long haul? Acting in agape love with your partner takes sacrifice. You are putting their well-being ahead of your own. But here's the upside. If you're both doing it, you both receive the benefit. Galatians 5:13 says, "You, my brothers, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the sinful nature. Rather, serve one another in love." In the coming week, I challenge you to take your eyes off yourself and focus on your partner. Live out what it means to extend that agape love. Don't forget to do your homework and spend some time discussing these things with each other. God bless, and I'll see you in the next session.